Welcome. Welcome to our 2024 Annual Holocaust Commemoration. I'm Professor Sarah Ducey, and I'm serving as host tonight on behalf of Paul Peck Humanities Institute Director Jamie Gillen. We are so glad you're here. Our annual commemorations began in 1998, led by Dr. Myrna Goldenberg, founding director for the Paul Peck Humanities Institute. We want you to know that Montgomery College is committed to teaching the Holocaust and that this commemoration, our 25th, is a part of that work. We offer the Portraits of Life Holocaust Survivors of Montgomery County Photographic Exhibition and Holocaust Survivor Speakers Bureau, the annual Bella Mishkinsky Lecture, and a variety of other programs at the college and in the community. Our commemoration is solemn, but not without beauty. During our candle lighting ceremony, you will meet Holocaust survivors from our region. We're honored tonight to have Holocaust survivor Dr. Alfred Munzer with us to share his witness testimony. We have poetry, we have music to help you understand, to feel, to process the losses of the Holocaust, and to strengthen your spirit and resolve as well. I'd like to do our thank yous and credits at the beginning of the program. This helps minimize distractions at the end so that you, our audience, can focus on absorbing and reflecting upon the experience. Also, at the close, watch for links and QR codes for our attendee survey and for the Montgomery County Public Schools Student Service Learning Form link, which some of you are very interested in. And we welcome you, MCPS students and families. The Paul Peck Humanities Institute has Holocaust education as a central feature. I want to recognize Professor Jamie Gillen, our director. Dr. Ken Jassy, coordinator of Holocaust education, is the person responsible for Holocaust education at our college, and he is here tonight. You will hear from him, you will learn about his programs, and you will know that he is the person that made tonight happen. I'd like to thank Dean Fiona Glade, you'll meet her soon, and Florence Gatson and Vivian Chang, who helped us do everything. We have 4 Holocaust survivors with us tonight. We have Peter Feigl, Manny Mandel, Alfred Munzer, and Robert Teitel. I want to thank the MC students and their mentors who are helping us tonight. We have singer Sheila Melendez, who has graduated and is now in Colorado, and she was working under Dawn Avery, our music director here at MC. We have readers, Susan Broskin and Catherine Musenden, and both of them work as interns with the Potomac Review Literary Journal, which is a nationally acclaimed journal operated out of Montgomery College, and it's led by editor-in-chief Professor Albert Kapikian, who is, by the way, fantastic. Our technical team and our leadership must be acknowledged. I want you to know that Montgomery College, the leaders behind this program and our college are important to our work and really support us. They support our Holocaust education and the broad swath of programs that we have in the humanities. Again, I'd like to be grateful to Fiona Glade, our dean, and to, in academic affairs, the whole leadership chain, if you will, Carolyn Terry, Deirdre Price, and Jermaine Williams, our president. And I should put an F in Jermaine Williams. The Montgomery College Foundation has been amazing for years. They helped us get established in 1998 and have been stalwart supporters ever since. Thank you to Montgomery County Public Schools, and especially Tracy Oliver Gary, the social studies specialist. Thank you to Montgomery College Television. They are helping us tonight to produce this. So those of you who have friends who were unable to attend later on, not too long, this will be produced and available on the college YouTube channel. I would also like to thank the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and their Carrie Bannister, who you will hear from shortly. For those of you who are interested, the Montgomery County Public Schools has a service learning form, and we will have the QR code for that and for an audience survey. And I do welcome you to participate in those. I would now like to give the mic to Dean Fiona Glade.
Thank you, Sarah. About 90 years ago, the world bore horrified witness to the very worst that people can be, to the worst that they can perpetrate against one another. And about 90 years ago, we also saw the incredible resilience that people can bring to bear against such cruelty when they're determined to survive. We're truly honored today to be with 4 honored survivors of the Holocaust. We gathered in appreciation of those who were lost and those who survived, in recognition of what they all represent in the meaning of the Holocaust and of all that they've accomplished. Anti-Semitism keeps on coming. Part of the reason we hold this event every year is to make plain the harm that anti-Semitism has caused and still continues to cause. The Portraits of Life program, under the brilliant and thoughtful direction of Professor Ken Jassy, has successfully maintained a consistent commitment to remembering, to teaching the Holocaust. As you will see this evening, Portraits of Life is and always has been a multi-generational enterprise. Tonight, we welcome many Montgomery County Public Schools students who have been part of our outreach at schools across the county, as well as Montgomery College students, friends, and family. We are also delighted to welcome other special guests, including County Council members and representatives from the U.S. Holocaust Museum. Of course, we're also here to celebrate our distinguished survivors. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Each one of you is an honored guest. And now I'll pass the mic back to Professor Ducey.
Thank you, Dean Blaine. We're going to have a candle lighting ceremony now. And what we've asked our survivors to do is to light a candle and to tell us who they remember tonight.
My name is Peter Feigl. I'm a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor born in Germany, and I've lit this candle this evening in commemoration of my mother and father, Ernst and Agnes Feigl, who were murdered in Auschwitz, and my father's youngest sister, Marianne, murdered in the killing fields of Belarus.
I'm Manny Mandel. I live in Silver Spring. I'm a Holocaust survivor who grew up in Hungary. I light this candle in memory of my grandparents, my mother's parents, Armin and Paula Klein, and in memory of my father's mother, Rosa Mandel, and in memory of all those for whom there is no one to light a candle.
I'm Alfred Munzer, and I light this candle in memory of my father, Simcha Munzer, my sisters, Eva and Leah, and especially my uncle, Elisha Munzer, who perished along with my sisters in Auschwitz. And also, of course, countless aunts and uncles, and all people who have perished as a result of hate.
Robert Teitel, an orphan survivor from the Netherlands. And I light this candle in honor of my parents, Abraham Manu Teitel and Claire Dunsbach Teitel, and one of my uncles, Emmanuel Joseph Teitel, and other members of my extended family who perished in the various camps.
Thank you. I am reading about Nelly Sachs, who was a Jewish exile from Nazi Germany who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1966. Her poem, Oh the Chimneys, inaugurated what we have come to know as Holocaust poetry. Here is an excerpt from her poem of exile, Flight and Metamorphosis. If someone comes from afar with a language that maybe seals off its sounds, with the mare's whinny or the chirping of young blackbirds, or like a gnashing saw that chews up everything in reach. If someone comes from afar, moving like a dog, or maybe a rat, and it's winter, dress him warmly, for who knows, his feet may be on fire, perhaps he rode in on a meteor. So don't scold him if your rug, riddled with holes, screams. A stranger always has his homeland in his arms, like an orphan, for whom he may be seeking nothing but a grave. Thank you.
Welcome, Professor Ken Jassy. Welcome to our 25th annual Holocaust commemoration. For those who have not studied the Holocaust before, I want to provide a little bit of context, some background information, and allude to some related sources. So for those unfamiliar with that history, the discussion that follows will be more comprehensible. Let's start with a definition which comes from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. You could also consult a similar definition from Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, which begins quite similarly, but also adds the statement that Jews were not the only victims of Hitler's regime, but they were the only group that the Nazis sought to destroy entirely. So how do we get to the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish question? Of course, the Holocaust could not have happened but for the long and sordid history of anti-Semitism, sometimes referred to as the longest hatred. To give a definition of anti-Semitism, it refers to prejudice or discrimination against Jews based on their religious beliefs and or group stereotypes. Anti-Semitism dates back at least to the establishment of Christianity as a state religion more than 1,500 years ago. And as a result, Jews were regarded as outsiders, as untrustworthy, and even dangerous. And this led to episodes of violence during times of crisis. Later on, by the 18th and early 19th centuries, Jews were looked at as different politically, socially, economically, and culturally, and as a result, were discriminated against. Major changes took place in the late 19th and early 20th centuries when the pseudo-scientific studies around race were popular, in which a scale of hierarchy based on race and understanding race as races as being in competition with each other for supremacy. And thus, even before 1933, when Hitler came to power, there was a mindset and a justification that certain people were understood and deemed as inferior and therefore potentially subject to extermination. Today, as we know, anti-Semitism is on the rise globally, exacerbated by the conflict in the Middle East. It has appeared visibly right here in Montgomery County with alarming frequency and elsewhere, including incidents in local schools. The Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, was created more than a century ago to inform about and combat anti-Semitism and other similar doctrines fostered by hate groups. The ADL's approach is to investigate, advocate, and educate. Today, we are mainly doing the latter, and you are strongly encouraged to do the former two. and you can find important information and educational resources and statistics on anti-Semitic hate crimes and incidents on their website, adl.org. Now, Montgomery College has been involved and committed to Holocaust education for quite some time, as you can see, starting with the annual commemoration, which began in 1998, Portraits of Life exhibition and program, which I'll talk a little bit more shortly. We have the Bella Mishkinsky Memorial Lecture given in the Germantown campus in the fall by a survivor or scholar. We arrange for survivors to speak in classrooms and in the community. We've done teacher training workshops about teaching the Holocaust, anti-bias training, poetry workshops. And for a long time, we had, hopefully we'll have again at some point, a class on the literature of the Holocaust. The most central part of what we do at Montgomery College around Holocaust education is Portraits of Life. For many productive years, I've been deeply involved and honored to be involved with Portraits of Life Holocaust survivors of Montgomery County, Maryland. Portraits is, first of all, an exhibition of almost 40 documentary and artistic panels depicting survivors from this area, 45 altogether, mainly from Montgomery County, and sharing some of their experiences of the World War II Holocaust era. It's an extraordinary exhibition in that, as being about the Holocaust, distressing, chronicling suffering and loss on a very personal level, and also inspiring about the struggle to survive and rebuild one's lives and thrive. Portraits of Life is also a kind of speakers bureau in which we organize and schedule survivors to provide their firsthand testimony in person, and more often these days on Zoom, to complement the exhibition. Portraits of Life was originally from the idea of Dr. Myrna Goldenberg, a Holocaust scholar who focused especially on the experience of women during the Holocaust, an emeritus professor at MC, and also my mentor. She was the founding director of the Paul Peck Humanities Institute, of which Portraits of Life is a branch, and she started the tradition of holding a commemoration at the college back in 1998. Holocaust education programs have received the unwavering and enthusiastic support of the PPHI, including a long and productive collaboration with my dear colleague, Sarah Ducey, Master of Ceremonies this evening, and the director for about a dozen years. Our new director is Professor Jamie Gillen, currently on maternity leave. We wish her the best. To learn more about Portraits of Life, or if you're interested in having a survivor speak at your school or educational organization, please don't hesitate to contact me. Portraits has traveled to dozens of locations over the years: government offices, cultural centers, libraries, art galleries, places of worship, historical sites, but most often to schools. middle schools, high schools, public and private, community college, and four-year institutions, where it has been seen by and impacted many thousands of people. As one viewer politely put it, it is a great starting point to have some difficult conversations about a complicated past. And that's putting it mildly. The entire collection was on display at MC in 2018, at Glenview Mansion in 2019, and as well as this past semester in 2023 in the Rockville Campus Art Building. We had a wonderful turnout for the opening reception on November 15th, with speeches given by MC President Dr. Williams, as well as County Council members Evan Glass and Will Jawando, as well as 6 Holocaust survivors. The most amazing part of my relationship with Portraits of Life has been working with the people behind the pictures. Individuals who have dealt with unimaginable hardship and heartache, but through it all, and until today, have remained steadfast and positive. I cannot say enough good things about their commitment to speak about a traumatic past at great cost, certainly not to gain anything financially or attention or for the sake of pity, but because people, including young people, need to know what happened, and knowing that, to speak and stand up against hatred and prejudice. For the many survivors I've met over the years, and you can see a few of them here, I have nothing but the highest regard. And Manny Mandel is here this evening. Helena is recovering from a fall, as is Josie Traum. Rita Rubenstein was a big supporter of Holocaust education, who passed away shortly before our last commemoration. And Freddie Traum, Josie's husband, a few years before that, although it feels recent and raw.
Thank you, Ken. Now, Holocaust survivor, Dr. Alfred Munzer.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here this evening. It's really a tremendous honor to follow so many distinguished speakers you've had in the past. As you heard, I was a physician, and for many years I did a lot of public speaking about the dangers of smoking, about air pollution, and those talks were always quite easy. But tonight I'm going to be sharing something that's much more personal, and it's the story of my family during the Holocaust. And to facilitate my talk, I will be showing you a lot of photographs, and so I'm going to start sharing my screen. This is the photograph that I usually like to start with, and it's a photograph of, usually when I speak in a classroom, I can ask students what it is they see. And eventually they will say, well, it's a woman holding a baby. And then I will ask them, well, who do you think the baby is? Or who do you think the woman is? Where is she from? And eventually someone will say, well, it looks like she came from Southeast Asia, somewhere in Asia. And eventually, if I'm really fortunate, someone will say she was born in Indonesia. And then I ask people, well, who do you think the baby is? And eventually someone dares to say, that little baby is you. And that indeed is really who I am, being held by this woman. Now, I wasn't born in Indonesia. I was born in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation. And my story is how it was that this woman, born in faraway Indonesia, came to be linked to this little baby, so that that little baby would be with you this evening. I'll start by telling you, sorry about that, a little problem, telling you a little bit about my parents. My parents were born in Eastern Europe and in a part of the world that was a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire until the end of World War I. At that point, their hometowns became part of Poland. My father was born in a small town called Kętrzyga, and my mother in a neighboring town called Rymanów. Those people have this impression of these small towns, shtetls as they are often called, of being very backwards. Perhaps it's because they've seen Fiddler on the Roof once too frequently. But in actual fact, one of the people who came from Rymanów, from my mother's hometown, was a man by the name of Isidor Rabi, who came to the United States and who received the Nobel Prize in Physics for the development for the discovery of electromagnetism. So here you have it, a big brain coming from one of those very little towns. When my parents were in their teens, late teens, they realized that there was very little future in those little towns. And so they decided to leave their hometowns. Both of them were about 18 years old. My father went directly to the Netherlands, where he started a men's clothing business. But my mother instead left Rymanów and joined older siblings who were living in the big go-to city at the time, the city of Berlin. My mother arrived in Berlin in the 1920s, just about the time when Adolf Hitler's infamous book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, was being published, in which he, of course, sets forth his whole racist ideology. But my mother wasn't interested in politics. She certainly wasn't interested in reading Hitler's book. She was much more interested in playing with her little nephews, my little cousin Norbert and my little cousin Yossi, and Norbert's mother sitting in the background. And you'll hear a little bit more about them a bit later in my presentation. Well, my mother remained in Germany until 1932. And then she joined my father in the Netherlands, where they were married in December of that year. December 1932 is just about the time when Adolf Hitler approached the aging president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, to be made Chancellor of Germany. And that, of course, started the whole Nazi era. But in Holland, where Jews had lived for hundreds of years, my parents felt very, very safe. My father's business flourished. and they made many, many friends. Most of them are actually not Jewish among their neighbors. In July 1936, my parents celebrated the birth of their first child, my sister Eva. Now, July 1936 is also the precise time of the infamous Berlin Olympics, which Adolf Hitler tried to turn into an instrument of Nazi propaganda. But again, in the Netherlands, in The Hague, where my city parents lived, they felt quite safe and rejoiced in the birth of their first child. Well, 2.5 years later, in November 1938, they celebrated the birth of their second child. And that was my sister Leah, being held here on the balcony of our home in The Hague. November 1938, of course, coincides with the time when the full fury of anti-Semitism was unleashed in neighboring Germany, just a few hundred miles away. The night of November 9th, 10th, 1938 is known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. And that's, of course, when hundreds of synagogues were desecrated and destroyed, and thousands of Jewish businesses were plundered. But again, in the Netherlands, my parents continued to feel safe. Well, to see the outbreak, of course, of Kristallnacht was a sign for Jews remaining in Germany to try to find a refuge in another country. And among those who were able to find a refuge in a faraway country was my Aunt Helen, whom you met earlier, my little cousin Norbert, and his father who probably took this photograph. And they were en route to South America and to the one country that was willing to take in Jewish refugees, Bolivia. And to this day, I still have relatives living in Bolivia. This very studious little boy, by the way, his name is Uli Knupfelmacher, became best friends with my cousin Norbert. And Uli first went to Bolivia, came back to the United States, and ended with a career as chairman of the Department of English at Princeton University. And I've had the pleasure of corresponding with him in the last few years, and I'm looking forward to really meeting him in person. There was one more important person in our family makeup, and that was my father's youngest brother, my uncle Emil, or his Hebrew name, Elisha. I was always very pleased and very proud of the fact that people said that I looked like him. And he really was an integral part of our family. Here's a photograph of the family, the Munzer family, enjoying an evening or an afternoon, rather, in the park, probably sometime in 1939. My uncle Emil holding my little sister Leah, my father holding Eva, and my mother sitting in the middle. It is hard to believe that just 3 years later, several of these people would have been killed by the Nazis. Well, life continued fairly well in the Netherlands, even though the Holocaust, of course, was progressing in neighboring countries. Until May 1940. That is, well, the particular May 10th, 1940, my parents had been asked to host a man who was a member of the Dutch resistance movement. And he had plans to preemptively destroy the railroad center in Utrecht in hopes that that might stop an invasion of Germany to the Netherlands. Unfortunately, 2 days later, when my parents turned on the radio, they heard that the port city of Rotterdam had been bombed. And shortly thereafter, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands came on the radio and announced that the Netherlands had surrendered. The first one to speak up was my parents' guest, this man from the resistance movement. He said, "Goddank, het is ten einde. Thank God, it's over." As far as he is concerned, there would no longer be a waste of Dutch manpower, army manpower, in what was to be a futile battle against the German power, against German power. But my parents, looking at their little children, perhaps in a playpen just like this, knew what had happened in Poland, what had happened in Germany, and they understood they were going to be in for a very difficult time. And indeed, within a very short period of time, all sorts of regulations and restrictions and humiliations were placed on the Jewish population. First, they had to register all their property so that it would be easier eventually for that property to be confiscated. Among the regulations was that the Jews were prohibited from going into public parks. And, when you have a silly regulation like that, you tend to disobey it. And so my mother continued to go take my little sister, Leah, in her baby carriage into the neighboring park. And one day, a German woman approached my mother in the baby carriage. My mother's heart almost stopped because she knew she wasn't supposed to be there. But then the woman played with the blonde curls of my little sister, pointed to her blue eyes, and said, "You can tell that this is good Aryan blood." Well, my mother thanked the woman and, of course, never went back to that park. Just an example of that racist ideology coming to the fore. Well, in spite of the occupation, my parents continued to observe my mother's birthday. And so in May 1941, they had photographs taken of the family. This is what a selfie would have looked like in the 1930s. And my sister Eva doing a little dance for the benefit of the photographer. But this is also the time when my mother found out that she was pregnant again. She consulted her obstetrician, and he told her in no uncertain terms that it would be immoral to bring another Jewish life into the world. But my mother, at that time, who wasn't particularly religious, recalled the story of a woman called Hannah. And her obstetrician had recommended that she have an abortion. But it was in reading of Hannah's agonizing desire to have a child, prompting her to go to the temple every year and pray, that my mother decided she could not possibly have an abortion. And so, without the help of the obstetrician, I was born at home November 23rd, 1941. And this brought about another dilemma in Jewish life, because traditionally Jewish male children are circumcised when they're 8 days old. And my parents' friends said, don't have him circumcised. It will identify him as being Jewish. But this time, the answer to their dilemma came in the form of a worried look on a pediatrician who had just examined me. My father asked him, is there something wrong with the baby? And then the pediatrician said, no, it's just that your little boy needs a minor operation we call a circumcision. My father told them of our Jewish custom, and so, indeed, 8 days later, the family gathered in our home to observe and celebrate this first milestone in a Jewish life. And here you can see my sisters, my father sitting behind them, and somewhere my uncle Emil, and I am somewhere on this pillow. What makes these these photographs very special is that they're very small. They're only 1 by 1.5 inch in size. And my mother was to keep these 2 small photographs hidden along her body through her subsequent stay in 12 concentration camps. She had this superstition, this feeling that if she ever lost these photographs, it would mean that I had been killed. Fortunately, I survived, my mother survived, the photographs survived, and they are now part of the collection of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Well, here I am with my sisters. It's one of my favorite photographs with them. But I'm probably sometime like 6, 7 months old. And this is a time when Jewish men were getting notices to report for labor duty, which meant being sent to concentration camps. And it was a signal to Jews to go into hiding. My father was the first one to go to hiding in a psychiatric hospital, pretending to be a patient. The next ones to go into hiding were my 2 sisters, right here, who assumed a Catholic identity and were placed with 2 Catholic women, very devout Catholic women, who were our neighbors, at least as a temporary measure. And I was placed with a neighbor of my mother, my parents, a woman by the name of Annie Madna. And Annie Madna passed me on to her sister. And then it turned out I remained with her sister, Yoreen, for about 3 weeks. But then they realized they had a neighbor who was a member of the Dutch Nazi Party. And that's how I ended up with this gentleman, Tole Madna, a man born in Indonesia who had been married to Annie Madna. And they were divorced. I had 3 children, and I had joint custody of those 3 children, and I now became part of Tole Madna's household. And it was Mima Saina, this Indonesian woman whom he had hired to take care of his children, who now became my mother. She is the one who you met at the very beginning of the presentation. Yes, she was born also in Indonesia, but came from a very poor background. She was never taught to read or write. She did not speak a word of the Dutch language, only her native Indonesian language. But she had a heart of gold, and that is how she became my mother. I slept in Mima's bed, and I am told that she kept a knife under her pillow, vowing to kill any Nazi who might try to come and get me. But the memories that I have of being with the Madna family were actually very happy ones. Yes, periodically I would have to, or was told to go into a closet to hide. And it meant that the house was actually being searched. But to me, it was just a game of hide and seek. There were also times when I was extremely hungry towards the end of the war, but most of the memories that I have are very happy ones. I was almost never allowed to go out of the house. Oops. But there were two little, let me go back to the previous photograph. This is my foster sister, Ava, and my foster sister, Davy. And here I am being held, of course, by Mima. And I was given a new name, Bubby. For many years, I thought I was called Bubby after the little dog, but that was corrected. In actual fact, to this day, I'm not sure who gave me the name Bubby. Well, I was rarely allowed out of the house, but there were two little kids right here who were allowed to come and play with me. They were Arthur and Helga Friederici. And they were trusted, this is the back of the photograph, they were trusted to come in and play with me because although they were German and lived in Holland, they were strongly anti-Nazi. Well, about 2 years ago, I had the amazing experience of being reunited with Arthur Friederici, who's now 83 years old. And he showed me some more photographs. Here's a photograph of me at age 2, and Arthur Friederici, a little bit older, and of course, Mima watching over us in the backyard, and my foster sister, Davy and Helga, over there. Well, while I was happy with the Madna family, my mother first joined my father in the same psychiatric hospital in hiding. But sadly, that only lasted a few months because they were then together with 250 Jews who were hiding in that hospital. They were all arrested and sent to concentration camps. My mother first went to a concentration camp in the Netherlands, both my parents actually, where she was fortunate to work for the Philips electronics factory. Early in 1944, my father was sent on from that concentration camp in Holland to Auschwitz. And I'll talk more about him later. My mother, a few months later, followed him to Auschwitz, but was fortunate to be then sent on to another electronics factory where she found a job that was considered important to the German war effort, assembling radio tubes. And that is what saved her life. Eventually, she witnessed the bombing of the factory where she worked, and she said a prayer of thanks to God for having saved her life. It wasn't the end of her ordeal because she was sent on a series of death marches, but eventually was liberated at the Danish border. Well, sadly, the story of my sisters was entirely different from mine. They remained with the two women for about a year, and then the local priest thought he had found a safer place for them. Unfortunately, that place wasn't safe. The husband of the woman who had agreed to take in my sisters denounced his wife to the Nazis as hiding two Jewish children. His wife was sent to a concentration camp and barely survived, but my two sisters were immediately sent to Auschwitz and were killed. They were only 5 and 7 years old. And this is a long list of people deported from the Netherlands. And right next to of the name of one of my sisters who name in hiding, Annie Munzer, is the name of my uncle, Emil, because it turned out that Uncle Emil found out that my sisters were being deported, and he was so fond of them that he ended up accompanying them to Auschwitz and being killed along with them. This is the man who arrested my sisters. His name is Dick Voss, reading Mein Kampf. He eventually was he was a Dutchman who immediately after the invasion volunteered to join the SS. After the war, he was tried and convicted for treason and served 20 years in prison. Well, in August 1945, I was reunited with my mother, and it's the first clear memory that I have. I was asleep and taken to the living room where the whole family was sitting in a circle, and I was cranky, so they passed me from lap to lap, but there was one lap I refused to sit in, and that was a woman I kept pushing away, a woman who was my own mother, because I did not know her. The following my mother at that time, to me, was Mima Saida. The following day, Arthur Friedrich's father took this photograph, which I received recently. And here you see my mother standing in the background, still not touching me. Well, the plan was for my mother, she knew it would be difficult for me to get used to her. So the plan was for her for me to be taken care of by Mima Saida. But sadly, 2 months later, Mima Saida passed away. And so now I have almost no memories of Mima Saida. This amazing woman, sainted woman who saved my life. All I remember was visiting her grave many, many times. This is a photograph taken of me shortly after I was reunited with my mother. And I haven't told you yet what happened to my father. Well, this is his registration card in Auschwitz. And he was assigned to working in a coal mine. Terrible work. And then eventually was sent to several other camps, all located in Austria, and finally ended up in this camp called Ebensee, high in the Austrian Alps, very close to the spot where The Sound of Music was filmed. One of the most beautiful places on earth where there was this terrible camp. And there he worked in underground abandoned salt mines, assembling V-2 rockets for the German army. He witnessed liberation by the US Army, but sadly passed away 2 months later. And this is his death certificate. And the cemetery at the former concentration camp, Ebensee, where my father is buried. Well, life started again in the Netherlands, in Holland for my mother. She acquired this business to make a living. Jewish life started over again. And here I am dressed up for the Purim holiday as a collection box for the Jewish National Fund, a costume made by my dear mother. But I always remained in close touch with Papa Magna. Here I am in the backyard, and here he is, seeing herself when my mother and I left for the United States in 1958. But I was still part of his family to the very end. Here's my photograph on top of his piano, and here I am with my siblings. And this is a photograph taken the very, very last photograph I have 2 months before Papa Madna, Tole Madna, passed away when my partner and I visited him. His last words to me were, "Take care of your mother," because that's the kind of person he was, much more concerned about the other than he was about himself. People asked him, "Why did you risk your life to save a Jewish baby?" And his answer was a simple one. What else was I to do? To him, there simply was no choice. It was the only thing for him to do. This is my favorite photograph of Tole Madna. The family, Madna family, is now honored at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. The names Tole Madna, Nima Saina, inscribed in the monument. I continue to tell the story of Nima and however saved by the Madna family. And this is with a group of Indonesian students. And when I told them this story, and I told them that the only memory that I have of Nima Saina is that she used to sing a lullaby to me. And the lullaby was called Nina Bobo. And the entire group started singing Nina Bobo in perfect unison. And then all of these students came up to me, hugged me, and embraced me, and said, "We are family." And that is where I want to end tonight. You know, it is to remember, to remind us all that in the end, we are all one human family. And what we really need to do is to do everything we can to eliminate the last hate and prejudice from our lives and in the world as a whole. And I wish and hope and pray for a day when indeed we can all finally celebrate our common humanity. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I did not go too far over time. Thank you for listening and for inviting me.
Thank you, Al, very much. And no, your talk was just the right length. Thank you for your engaging presentation. It means a lot. And for tying your personal history so effectively to that of what was taking place in Europe, time with your family when you were born, and connecting that to the Holocaust. It cannot be easy to look back and think about the loss of so many loved ones. Your commitment to informing people about the Holocaust is a noble task. And absolutely agree with you that we are one human family and that we should do better. Thank you again, Al, and we greatly appreciate you. Now you'll hear a recently recorded performance by a former MC Music student, Sheila Melendez, who will sing Es Brent, a Yiddish song from the 1930s by Mordecai Gebertig, which was written in response to a pogrom, an attack on the Jewish community of Przytyk in Poland in 1936.
Hello, my name is Sheila Melendez, voice faculty at Montgomery College. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your service. Es brennt, brüderlich, es brennt. Unser Orem Städtel Nebech brennt. Bei so Winden mit hier Gosen, Reisen brechen und zerbläusen. Stärker noch die wilde Flammen, als Arum scheun brennt. steht und guckt, da soll sich mit verlegter Hand. Und steht und guckt, da soll sich unser Städtel brennt. It burns, brothers, it burns. Our poor Städtel pitifully burns. Angry winds with rage and curses, tears and shatters and disperses. Wildflowers leap, they twist and turn. Everything now burns. And you stand there looking on hands, folded palms upturned. And you stand there looking on our Städtel burns. Es brennt, brüderlich, es brennt. Unser Ohr im Städtel nebech brennt. Bei so Winden mit ihr Gosen, Reisen brechen und zerbläusen. Starker noch die wilde Flammen, als schon brennt. Und steht und guckt, da soll sich mit verlegter Hand. Und steht und guckt, da soll sich unser Städtel brennt.
Just lovely. Thank you, Shayla. Ken.
Okay, now comes the part of the program, the poignant and emotional part, where I will read the names of the portraits of life Holocaust survivors who are no longer with us. When Portraits was first exhibited in 2005, 45 individuals were represented on 37 panels. Only 9, according to my latest calculations, are still with us. As my good friend and portrait survivor Manny Mendel, whom you met, has put it so succinctly, survivors of the Holocaust are a diminishing resource, one that we should not take for granted. Some statistics. Worldwide, according to a recent study by the Claims Conference released in January of this year, there are approximately 245,000 Holocaust survivors remaining, living in 90 different countries. 49% of them live in Israel, 18% in North America, with 16% in the US, and 18% in Western Europe. Their median age is 86. The eldest known, Mrs. Rose Giron, who's 112, who resides in New York. 61% of these survivors are women and 39% are men. Since our last commemoration in late February 2023, we have lost 3 more of our dear friends: David Bayer, Julia Miller, and Nessie Godin, just the other day. We refer to all of them as being of blessed memory. I will state their names while showing a picture of each. Traditionally, at commemorations of the Holocaust, there is usually a reading of the names of some of those who were killed. Some of these survivors I knew very well, like David and Nessie. Others, like Julia, only by report. But all were irreplaceable members of this community. Fanny Eisenberg, David Bayer. To say a few words, he passed away last year when he was 100 years old. And despite the torments of being a prisoner at the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration death camp, well into his 90s, I recall, he would take the time working with our portraits group to speak every year at Eastern Middle School, which was near his home in Silver Spring. He would speak very forthrightly about his experiences of the Holocaust, never mincing words. He spoke to the students in English and in Spanish because he wanted them to understand the importance of learning about the Holocaust and speaking out against injustice. He was not a tall man, but he exuded strength and had the strength to care about others. Bella Mishkinsky-Bermanis and Irene Glassberg, Eva Blumberg, Beatrice Carasso, Isaac and Yona Dickmann, Erika Eckstut, Eva Ehrlich, Manja Friedman, Fritz Gluckstein, Nessie Godin. Now, Nessie found out, Sarah Ducey sent me a text the other morning with her obituary in the Washington Post. Nessie, quite simply, was unforgettable and extraordinary. And I don't say that about too many people. She was a leader in the survivor community, speaking to audiences far and wide, even before it became common to do so. Her voice and intonation were entrancing. You felt carried back to wartime Lithuania and the horrors that she witnessed there committed against the Jewish community, where almost 90% of Lithuanian Jews were killed, including her father. And then she talked about the almost miraculous survival of she and her mother. On a personal note, it was quite painful a few years ago when at a local commemoration event, I ran into Nessie and she didn't recognize me. But in a way, and it wasn't just me, at a certain stage, she couldn't remember just about anyone anymore. But in a way, it was a kind of blessing for her, not having to relive the many, many nightmares from her past. Hannah Green, Henry Greenbaum, Yuda Levy and Ruth Horwitz, Rosette Connick, Wellick and Hinta Luxembourg, Peter Masters, Leon and Nina Merrick, Eugene and Julia Miller, Sylvia Razinas, Rita Rubenstein, Charlene Schiff, Esther Sendrovich, Flora Singer, has an elementary school named after her in Montgomery County, Regina and Sam Spiegel, Harriet Steinhorn Roth, Herman and Susan Taub, and Freddie Traum. Please keep these amazing people in your thoughts. Thank you.
Hi, I'm reading Todesfuge by Paul Celan, and it has been described as one of the most important poems of the 20th century. Written in a fragmented and surreal style, it reflects Salon's experience in the death camps. He once said, "There's nothing for which a poet will give up writing, not even when he's a Jew and when the language of his poems is German." This is a translation by Dean Rader. Black milk of daybreak, we drink it at dusk. We drink it at noon, in mornings. We drink it at night. We drink and we drink. We dig a grave in the sky. There is plenty of room. A man lives in the house. He plays with his snakes. He writes. He writes when it darkens in Deutschland, your golden hair, Marguerite. He writes it and steps outside of the house. In the strike of the stars, he whistles his hounds. He whistles his Jews, dig a grave in the ground. He commands us, strike up for the dance. Black milk of daybreak, we drink you at night. We drink you in mornings and midday. We drink you at dusk. We drink and we drink. A man lives in the house. He plays with his snakes. He writes. He writes when it darkens in Deutschland, your golden hair, Marguerite. Your ashen hair, Sulamite. We dig a grave in the sky. There's plenty of room. He shouts, you there dig deeper. The rest of you sing. You others play on. He raises the rod from his belt. His eyes are blue. Drive the spade deeper. The rest of you sing. You others play on for the dance. Black milk of daybreak. We drink you at night. We drink you at midday and mornings. We drink you at dusk. We drink and we drink. A man lives in the house. Your golden hair, Marguerite. Your ashen hair, Sulamite. He plays with his snakes. He shouts, make death sound sweeter. Death is a master from Deutschland. He shouts, strike the violin darker, then rise as smoke in the air. Then a grave in the clouds. There is so much more room. Black milk of mornings, we drink you at night. We drink you at midday. Death is a master from Deutschland. We drink you at dusk. In mornings, we drink and drink. Death is a master from Deutschland. His eye is blue. His lead bullets strike you. His aim is true. A man lives in the house, your golden hair, Marguerite. He whistles his hounds. He grants us graves in the sky. He plays with his snakes, and he dreams death is a master aus Deutschland. Your golden hair, Marguerite. Your ashen hair, Sulamite.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Audience, this brings us to the end of our program. We are so grateful for you spending the time with us to learn more about the Holocaust from people who've lived it and from writers and musicians who contribute so much. Your time here with us is your gift to us and to the world. Thank you so much.